This is the Holy Mountain Podcast, where we discuss what it means to find rest, regain perspective, and reconnect with the world around us. Welcome back, everybody. This is Shane Oehler, and I'm solo today. If you listened to last episode, I was with Chad and Colin, and we were talking through that elk hunt, and we kind of teased some of those bear encounters that I had, and so I thought I'd sit down today, talk about bears for a little bit. I am a little under the weather, so if you are listening and you think I sound different, that's probably why, a little stuffy, but we're going to just power through it. Just talking about bears today. I think for a long time, bears have just been intriguing to me because I just never encountered them. I never saw them while I was out hunting. They were never an animal that I, randomly bumped into otherwise. And so I think they always had that mystery to them, which made them more interesting to me. And yeah, something that I maybe like hyped up in my mind just because of the infrequency or of just never seeing them at all. And so, yeah, bears have always kind of been a special animal to me. When I moved to Montana, I started going to a couple of the Peaks Bear Tours that Brian Call, Ryan Lampers, and Mark Livesay would put on. And so I started investing, some money, but a lot of time into learning about bears and how to hunt bears, because the first bear that I actually saw was in Oregon, but it was after we had already moved to Montana. And so how that played out is we hadn't been in Montana long enough to actually be residents of Montana yet. And so I still had Oregon tags. And so Becca and I came back to Oregon. We hung out with friends for a while, and then she went back, but I stayed and solo hunted for like 4 days. And that's a hunt I've talked about before on the podcast, but I've never told this story with the bear. And so really how it all played out was I had worked into this area and just seen a ton of crows. They were super loud. I was hearing them constantly. I think I was seeing turkey vultures flying up. And so I knew like something was dead in the area. So I eventually worked my way like just closer and closer until I could really kind of like pinpoint what these birds were focused on. And it turned out to be this deer carcass that looked like it had been poached after I looked at it for a while. So it had a couple, like shot wounds behind the front shoulder, but then the antlers had just been like sawed off. You could tell that there was more to it, but it was clean cuts across both antlers. And then the deer had just been left there to waste. And so I reported it to OSP, and then I kind of went about my day. I wasn't really thinking about that carcass or anticipating, like utilizing it as a tool on the hunt or anything like that. Because I did have a bear tag in my pocket and a mountain lion tag. And I had seen mountain lion tracks on this same hunt. And so I didn't know what I was going to encounter, but the main focus for me was deer and elk. I was back in an area close to where Caleb and I had bumped into that elk herd that we talked about. And so that was my hope, really, was that I was going to be elk hunting. I knew there's mule deer in the area too, so potentially deer hunting. And so after finding this carcass and reporting it, I remember kind of working away to this pond. I just kind of wanted to check that out. It was close to some thick timber. Thought it might be getting used. I was just trying to kind of get a lay of the land and get a sense for this area. And I remember circling back and looking down towards the carcass again and just seeing this like black mass that I just assumed was still a crow, like naively. It's like, that is the biggest crow I've ever seen. And so I pull up my binoculars, I look at it and just see this big bear head. And this bear was just hunkered down, like feeding on this carcass. And so I watch it for a little bit, just briefly, but it was, snapping at different crows, pawing at them, trying to scare them off. And so they would flush out and then they would come back. They would flush out, come back. And so I remember seeing that pattern in my head as well. But one of the coolest moments was watching this bear turn and leave the carcass, and there was this fallen dead tree, like pretty close by. And it was kind of walking across, and then it turns and looks back at the carcass. All the birds had come back again, and it roars and then runs back to the carcass, flushes out the birds again. And so again, I'm kind of seeing that pattern of birds coming, flushing out, coming, flushing back, or flushing out. And so I kind of made a plan to stalk in on this bear, try to see if I could shoot it with my bow. And so I work in, and I'm continuously like checking wind, checking yardage. And I get to the point where I remember being like 80 yards away, and the birds had kind of like flushed out again. And so I thought like the bear's there, like it has to be there. And I slowly keep working my way in. And this was one of the times where I was a little disoriented. The closer I got, I was more and more unsure if I was actually working in on the right spot. And then eventually I did get to the point where I was kind of like looking around, I have to be right here. And then I did see the deer carcass, and it had been pulled a little bit. So where the bear had moved it and where I had first seen it was slightly in a different location. It had pulled it into some better cover, but the deer looked entirely different at that point. When I first found it, it might have had a little bit eaten off its backside, but at this point it was like bones. This bear had just demolished this deer. And so I took a couple more pictures, but ultimately like moved on. I did try to set that carcass again the next day, but I don't think there was it wasn't worth the bear coming back in, I think. And I'm assuming like I did blow it out at some point, because I didn't see that bear again as I was making the stock. But then the next day either, I didn't see that bear. But that was my first encounter with a bear while hunting. And it was epic to me. Like I thought it was so cool. And there's just, again, something about bears that just drew me in. And yeah, I was super intrigued by. And so after that hunt, I went back to Montana, and I think it was the next week, saw a little chocolate bear just kind of running across the road while I was at work, and we were taking some students on an outing. And so it was, again, I like went, my whole life up to that point without seeing bears. And then in the span of a week, I end up seeing 2 bears. And then pretty consistently that spring, there was a bear here, a bear there that I would see. And so they started becoming like less and less mysterious to me, but they still held that interest and that value to me that I was really drawn to. And I think it might have been that first, or so this would have had to have been the next year, because it was my first spring as a resident of Montana and hunting bears. I was with a couple buddies. We were in spots that we were, seeing a bunch of bear scat. We thought it was great, like green up zones, and the feed looked like it was there. And we ended up working this closed logging road and kind of coming to a point, and we were all kind of defeated. Like, man, we just don't know like what to do. We don't know what we're doing wrong or what to do differently. And I remember one of the guys kind of expressing some frustration. And then I was like, oh, there's a bear right there. And I remember feeling like they didn't really believe me, but I was like, no, seriously, I think there's a bear right there. And just a few hundred yards away from us, this black bear was just kind of working across the opposite hillside. I didn't feel confident in trying to like rush a shot at that point. And so I ended up dropping down, working across, took a good path. They said it was like exactly where the bear had gone. I was finding super fresh poop, but again, didn't end up encountering a bear or encountering that bear again on that hunt. But after that, kind of the following years, I began to just have more and more run-ins with bears, and in pretty close proximity. There's a spot that I talked about in the Spring Takeaways podcast that's the spot that I've like really first encountered multiple bears. And so it's, hung on to me. And one of those times I was glassing the opposite face where I've now seen, multiple bears. but I'm on a closed logging road doing that. And I remember stepping out, not seeing anything, and I look down farther along the closed logging road, and I see this, again, black mass through the trees. I'm like, yep, stump. So I pull my binos up again, just big, blocky black bear head. And I'm instantly like, oh my goodness, like there's a bear right there. So I range it. It was 54 yards away, again, through the trees. And so I remember just sitting down on that closed road, taking my pack off, propping my rifle up and watching it through the scope. And I'm thinking like, it just has to take 2 steps to clear these branches. Then I'll have a perfect broadside shot how it's feeding. Wind was pulling down. Like the situation was perfect. It was one of those where I was already, taking the photos in my mind, trying to think about the pack out, all that stuff. And I remember like looking up from my rifle at the bear, and then I couldn't see it anymore. I looked back and the bear had turned and was running away. And for a second, I was completely baffled. I had no idea what just happened. And then I checked the wind, and the wind had swirled, started pulling towards the bear. And so that bear winded me. And yeah, didn't have the opportunity to even take a shot. But that was, without a doubt, the closest opportunity that I had at a bear, the closest I'd been to a bear, 50 yards. Yeah, just a couple more steps, and could have been a different situation. But in that same area, I would consistently go back and hunt, usually like one random evening a week. But after I saw a bear the first time I went out, just like a little color phase bear, put a stock on it. It bumped out, then had this bear at 50 yards. So I went back again, I think that same week, and hadn't seen anything the whole night. And then as we went to leave, I had a coworker with me, and I knew he was working a morning shift, so he had to get back because he was waking up super early. And so we left like a little bit sooner than I would. But as we were coming back, I remember seeing, again, like this black mass that I knew isn't typically there. So I immediately was like, oh, that's a bear. Like a bear had come up on another road. And so I'm, dropped a waypoint, checked the wind, and then we hustled to get up there and to try to be kind of parallel to this bear, to get up on the same level as it on the closed road, but to try to make sure, like if wind switched and started pulling down, it's not going to wind us. If wind is still pulling up, it's not going to wind us. But to try to, be parallel with it, but get to the same elevation. And so, we hustled our way up. Could have taken like a pretty, difficult shot at 300 yards. Didn't want to do that. So kept pushing up and getting closer, and eventually got right around 200 yards to this bear where we wanted to be. So on the same road, I'd taken my pack off and tried to get steady. And I remember watching the bear. It was feeding and kind of like spinning and turning. And so once it went broadside, I did have that, again, this has been kind of my downfall in some of these scenarios, but I had that moment where I was like, I have to shoot right now. And so I remember probably like jerking on the trigger, shoot. I would have thought that I saw the bear kind of like do that back up lunge, like it had been hit. And then it ran like 70 yards downhill, turned, looked back at us, and then kept running down again. And I thought I had hit that bear. We went over and kind of checked where it had been, and we weren't able to find blood right away. We found a fresh pile of poop, like exactly where it had been. So again, felt like we were definitely looking at the right spot in the right area. But with as dark as it was, and again, knowing the coworker had to get back, I just made a plan to come back first thing the next morning. So I take him back the next morning, go out and just try to retrace my steps. And I eventually spend like the entire day just gritting back and forth, looking for anything, walking the creek bottom, going back up and doing that again. And I didn't see anything, didn't see a drop of blood, never found the bear. And kind of in hindsight, what I think could have happened is I do think I was at an awkward angle when I was trying to shoot from my pack. Like the hill was kind of pointing down, my pack propped me back up. And so I think that like the parallax in my scope was off. So I wasn't actually looking through it level. And so I think I actually like flat out missed that bear and just scared it, because I think also like it was feeding, and like it jumping from the sound, I think could have actually been what I was anticipating was me hitting it. But I had a friend that had hounds, and he'd use them to, blood trail. Well, he had other dogs too. I'd used them to blood trail animals before, and kind of talked through the scenario with him, explained, what the bear did and what I had done. And he felt pretty confident that I missed that bear. And so that was a huge bummer to me, obviously, like missing an animal like that. And really that was my first shot attempt at a bear. And so, yeah, that was a huge bummer, like really discouraging. But I think it was cool, again, just to see a bear, to have a stalk pan out after a couple failed stalks, and to at least have that experience. Again, didn't go the way I wished it would have, but it was an opportunity at a bear. And it was, me kind of feeling like, not that I was piecing the puzzle together, because I definitely still don't feel like I've pieced the puzzle together with bears, but it was another opportunity at a bear that I had. So that kind of concluded that spring season. I think I saw another bear on the opposite side when I went back to look for the bear that I thought I hit. And then, seeing bears run across roads, things like that. Actually, the coworker that came with me too, he sent me a picture of a really nice jet black that had crossed the road in front of him, probably in that June time period where that bear was running, starting to look for a hot sow. But yeah, that was the year of bears. For whatever reason, I think I saw close to 10 bears that spring. Again, after, seeing 2 the year before, and then none, like my whole life really up to that point. So that was cool. The next year I had another kind of cool experience where I was working at the time. There was block management land right around it. And so there was times where I could kind of step out and be hunting from the cabin that we were staying in. And we had heard from other coworkers that there was a bear that had been seen in the area. And so I went out to look for it with my bow, and Becca had dropped me off kind of at the bottom of this creek bed again. And I kind of like worked my way up where people been saying it was in the area, or they thought it might be. And I remember it was like one of those like sixth sense type things where I'm like, I know that there is a bear here. Like I can almost sense it. And so I'm just going really slow, kind of like working cautiously through. And I get to a point where I'd been working through some timber, but then there's going to be like a gap, this little clearing, and then kind of like another patch of trees. And so I knew I was going to have to expose myself and step out of the trees. And so I did that. I took a step. I remember looking to my left, and just as I'm doing that, this big chocolate bear is taking a step out and looking to his right. And so we literally like are doing the exact same thing, make eye contact, and both pause. I remember pulling out my rangefinder quickly and ranging him. He was like at 71 yards. I put it back, and then I think I did grab an arrow to see if I could knock an arrow, and then he turned and ran. But I still think to this day that was the biggest black bear that I had seen. He was a tank, just super thick body. Again, another big head on that bear, but he was just beefy and like stout. And yeah, 70 yards away from him, I end up continuing to go, and I have another small color phase bear kind of cross my path. And then a little bit, and I elected to just let that bear go. I didn't try to put a stock on it. I let it go. I keep going and kind of work a little bit higher because the wind was kind of doing some funky stuff. And I end up seeing a sow with 2 cubs. So still black bears. The sow was a chocolate, and then she had 1 chocolate cub and 1 jet black cub. And I was 80 yards from them. And so I just watched them for a while, took some video. I've shared that before. But that was super fun for me, just seeing bears be bears, seeing these cubs. They were wrestling and then climbing up trees and then coming back down and, jumping on each other. And the sow was kind of circling the tree, and you could tell like constantly checking the wind. And the way that the wind was blowing, she might have smelled me at one point, but I'm honestly thinking that big chocolate bear that I saw was actually coming to kill those cubs. So if you don't know that, dominant boars or male bears will pursue cubs, and they will often kill them to try to get that sow to come back into heat so that he can breed her again and kind of guarantee that it's his cubs that are being reproduced. And so that was something that, I was aware of. I knew like that happens, but that was the only thing I could really think that would justify why I saw those other 2 bears, but particularly that big boar in the area. Kind of since that hunt, I had learned more. That is a fawning area for the deer, and then like calving area too for an elk herd. And so we've seen, or like other staff members that I used to work with had seen black bears come in and kill fawns as well, really close to where we worked. And so I know that dynamic is at play as well for that area. But I think for that particular night, I think it was those cubs that were drawing that big boar to the area. And that sow really hung around for a couple days. The next day, I remember seeing her again, and she had stashed the cubs like super high up in a tree, so I got to watch her kind of go up and retrieve them. But it was also fun because it was in an area where I was able to go back, get Becca, and she was able to watch that sow too for a little bit. So super cool experience on both of those, from the big chocolate boar, but then also that sow and her cubs, just to be close to bears, both of those within 100 yards, and just watch them. The sow, I don't think really knew I was there, and so got to watch her a couple times, and that was super fun. But yeah, I had back-to-back years of bears really close, and I think it was either the same year as the big chocolate boar, or it could have been the next year, that fall. I also had another run-in with a little chocolate bear. This one came into a pond that I had been sitting. It was one of those kind of, tricky ones in my brain where I know people have said like bears are hard to field judge, and there's different things you can look for, and I'm aware of that. But when this bear first came in, I thought it was a good sized bear. Like its head still looked big, ears looked small on the side of its head. It did not look like thin and lanky or anything like that, like some juvenile bears can. It looked, again, kind of like a pretty stout bear. But I was watching it come in on this pond. It was like jumping on like some of these big rocks to try to drink and get position. And so I remember being at full draw on this bear, and it's just like still spinning, like not doing what I would have hoped, and just like settling and drinking and, giving me a broadside shot. And so, yeah, I ended up taking a really poor shot on this bear, skipped my arrow off the rock underneath it, and it ended up like nicking part of its leg. And the bear kind of like ran towards me and literally got like 5 yards away from me, like looking around, has no idea what's happening. And then it goes off and kind of keeps running on. And there was a little blood trail on it. And I did not at all think that was a fatal shot on that bear, just knowing how it played out. But I, again, wanted to do my due diligence. And so I tracked that bear for a long time, like for the rest of that night, and then came back the next day as well. And the blood had completely, stopped. And another one of those like confident times that like that bear's alive and on its feet. Like I didn't actually kill that bear. So yeah, I have had two unfortunate situations with bears where the first one, likely a miss with my rifle, and then this one just a super poor shot with my bow, and then just nicking a leg really. But yeah, so that was, I think those 3 years, I had like 3 years in a row where the farthest a bear was from me was 70 yards. And then I had a lot of those close encounters. And so again, bears have been super intriguing. Like those have been awesome experiences. Definitely things that I would, wish to take back, do differently, but I've learned from them for sure along the way. But now to get to the story of the bear hunts that were kind of these sidebars from Chad and Colin and I's elk hunt from last fall. So Colin, when he had been there previously, had said that they had some run-ins with bears. And I think, I wish I was doing this with Colin, but I think he had said that he had watched this big bear feed on like a moo cow carcass. And then they had seen another one kind of working through some fruit trees. And so, they had a couple run-ins with bears. So he had told me going in, like, there's a real possibility that there's going to be bears in the area. And so that's where we had talked about, if there happens to be a bear, I would love to have a chance at that. Like I've killed a couple bull elk with my bow. They hadn't had that experience yet. And so I wanted them to have that experience. But again, the bears have evaded me, or I've, ruined the opportunities when they've been there. And so I wanted a chance of, redemption in some ways, but just still hoping to find success on a bear. So we had that kind of agreement going in. So then when Chad kills his bull and we pack it out, that next day we're making plans again. We knew there's multiple bulls in that area. Like we had talked about before, there was the one bull that we were originally, I think, stalking in on that got back on his feet and saw our movement and he scooted out of there. There was the big bull that Colin had bumped that was bedded down in the bench. And then I'm trying to remember, I think we still heard bugles actually when we were looking for Chad's bull. And then when we were also packing it out, we were hearing bugles farther down. So we knew that there was bulls in this area still. So the plan was for Chad and Colin to kind of go back in that same spot, keep elk hunting. But then Colin said like, it'd probably be worth going back to Chad's carcass and seeing if a bear's hit it. So that was my plan. So we got to this point where we split off. I was going to kind of make a pretty long approach to the carcass. There was a hillside like opposite of where the carcass was. And so my hope was to get eyes on the carcass, potentially on a bear before ever like really dropping down and starting a stalk, just so I could see and plan for that stalk. Like I wanted to know, like, is a bear already here? Can I have that intel? Can I figure out where exactly this bear might be and how I can approach it? So I get to this high point, and like we had said, where the carcass was, it was just such thick vegetation that I could not see anything. And I had dropped a waypoint when we were coming out, but that was another thing in hindsight. Like I should have dropped the waypoint exactly where we were when we were processing the elk. And so I wasn't 100% confident that my waypoint would take me exactly where this carcass was going to be. And so, I get to this high point, can't get a vantage. So I just decide, well, I'm just going to drop down, slowly make my way to the carcass. That ended up not being as positive as I had hoped because it was a lot of rocky kind of shale terrain on that hillside. And so it was just loud. There was no way for me to not be loud coming down off this hill. And so that was unfortunate. Like I was kind of frustrated at that reality anyways, as I was dropping down. but still wanted, to do what I could, obviously. So I eventually get to the point where I'm back down kind of level again with where the carcass would be. And I just start really trying to slow down, take my time, kind of do a little bit of a reset. And so there was this closed road that we had kind of put the quarters up on, like when we were talking about all the flies and that ground cloth that we had down, that was up on this closed road. So I'm now on the closed road. I'm looking at the trees, kind of remembering where we had put that cloth down and where we had been. And so I'm slowly working to the edge, and I am confident that I'm hearing something, like some rustling in the brush, but I just can't see anything. And I see where the carcass was, but it isn't anymore. And then I remember looking up because I'm hearing more brush. And then I see this black bear just walk up the opposite side. And it wasn't far, like probably 50 yards maximum, I would guess, from where I was. And so I see this bear walk up. I'm trying to keep eyes on it, and I see it turn and then kind of like work diagonal and down. But I remember, again, just big, blocky head on this bear. I couldn't quite make out like how big the bear was, because I remember thinking like the front end wasn't super big. Its legs looked huge, like thick. Sometimes they'll say like sows, like their arms will kind of taper down and they'll have thin wrists. Like this thing definitely had big fronts on it. I think it was a boar, and so I'll probably say him. So I do think it had big like front arms on him. Definitely didn't taper down into like slim wrists, but his chest was just not super big, but then his back half was. And so sometimes they'll say like sows can be kind of like pear-shaped, where they will have that look to them, where like smaller fronts, bigger backsides. But I don't know. I would have loved to actually like see this bear on the ground, obviously, to see what it was. But yeah, it looked like a big bear right out the gate to me, just because of the head size. It did have very big, thick front arms. But then some of the body shape just wasn't kind of quite matching up in my mind. But I watched this bear kind of go down, and then I can't see it again. And my thought was to not push it. I think it definitely didn't smell me, but I think it was just uncomfortable enough. I think it knew something else had moved into the area, and so that's why it backed off and pushed away. But I wanted to just kind of play the long game on it and sit there, let it kind of develop throughout the day. So I made a plan to just like literally sit for the rest of the day over this carcass. And it wasn't directly over it, because what I had decided to do was just really try to anticipate that bear's path. So where it was kind of coming down, if it continued to follow that angle, it would have gotten back into the creek bed. And so my thought process was, that's going to be the best cover for this bear to return back to the carcass. It's going to be cool throughout the day because it was hot that whole time. And it's, again, like the travel route, that just seemed to be like where it was coming from. So my assumption was it's going to work the creek bed back up to the carcass. So I'm going to position myself a little farther back in the creek bed, so that if this bear does come back, it's going to come back up through the creek bed. Then it's going to taper off on this very defined game trail, and it's going to go where it had pulled the carcass into like thicker cover again. And if this bear was going to do what I expected it to do, it was going to be 19 yards from me as it came up and turned. I was also sitting just, I think, 5 to 10 yards behind where the bear had gone up. And so that was also a very defined trail where the bear had cut through the creek bed and then gone up that opposite side. So I'm sitting kind of in between these 2 points that in my mind are high traffic areas. And I thought would kind of give me the best chances at seeing this bear again. And so I sit here all day, and I could look back on pictures to remember like actually how long it was, but it was hours and hours that I was sitting here, really just kind of half cheeking it on like the creek bed. There was kind of like more of a berm that kind of then drifted down into the creek bed. And so I was like half cheeking it on that berm. And I remember just, the way that my mind works, I'm like constantly making plans. I feel like I'm fairly strategic with how I approach things. And to me, that's like a mental boost. If I know what the plan is, I can buy into it and I can remain optimistic. And so I know my plan is like, I'm going to sit here all day. But then if I don't see anything, I'm going to slowly start stalking my way to the actual carcass when there's like 15 minutes of light left, just in case the bear slipped in quietly and I never saw it. If it didn't come in the way I expected it to, I wanted to still have a chance at this bear before the day ended. So my plan was to, stalk in again with 15 minutes of light left. So the day continues to go. I don't see anything. I get to the point where I think, okay, there's 15 minutes of light left, and I'm starting to hear something over at the carcass. Like, again, it sounds like some rustling, what I had heard before. And so in my mind, the bear had already gotten there. But again, I wanted to stick to my plan. And so I waited until 15 minutes until last light. And so right at that point of 15 minutes, I decided, okay, I'm going to go work my way in, see if something is there. I slowly stand up from that berm. And just as I do, I see the bear stepping out 25 yards away from me. It was coming up the creek bed. There was this fallen tree that had quite a bit of overhang, so the bear would kind of have to duck underneath it, but there's plenty of space for it to do that. So as I step up, I see the bear kind of like flinch and then turn, and it runs. And I am like floored. I'm so mad. Literally 30 seconds longer, and that bear is in my lap, like just as I had planned, where I expected it to go. But instead, I'm standing up and it spooks out 25 yards from me. And so it whirls and starts going up the hill. I start hightailing it up the path that the bear had gone earlier in the day. And it's looking at me, and I can see now, like, this is a big bear. Like, whatever I had kind of seen before to be confused about the body, like, now I see, like, this is a fully, like, just thick, jet black, mature bear. And so it goes up. I start huffing at it. This is something I've seen Jim Shockey do in some of his shows, where he will huff at these big mature boars, and sometimes it'll get him to turn back. And I can't remember, honestly, I don't think it huffed back at me. I could definitely hear its like labored breathing as it was climbing up this steep hillside. But yeah, I was trying to keep pace with it and kind of parallel it up the hillside, huff at it to try to, challenge it really for this carcass and get it to spin around. But it didn't end up coming back. And so, I end up just honestly being like a little devastated again that I had this scenario that had played out just as I expected it to, but then the timing was just slightly off. And what made matters worse is, as this is happening with the bear, I'm recognizing like it's been longer than I expected, and it's still light out. Like, it's not, super bright, but it's not as dark as I would have expected. And so I sit down and check stuff again, and I realized that I had looked at last light wrong. That I was actually 15 minutes ahead of true last light. And so then if I would have really stuck to my plan, if I would have had all of the right info or looked at it correctly, then I still would have been sitting there for another 15 minutes before trying to get up and trying to do anything differently. So that bear would have walked, I think, how I expected it to. It for sure would have cleared that little zone. And so it would have been inside of 25 yards for me if I would have looked at the time clocks correctly, if I would have mapped out last light correctly, and just stayed put for a little bit longer. And so I was bummed. Again, just it's my error, right, that had caused that shortcoming and that kind of fallout from that hunt. And it was funny too, like you guys heard Chad last episode say, do what Shane says when he says it, how he says it. He was honestly really helpful and like an encouragement to me in this hunt, because I'd done a lot of solo hunting and like I had hunted with other people, and there had been like pros and cons with those experiences, but he really reaffirmed, like, Shane, you have the right ideas, just trust yourself. And so that was even with when we were stalking on the mule deer. There were certain things that I would say, and he's like, do it. Like, if that's what you think, like, trust it. Like, trust your instinct. Your instincts have been right. And so that had, gotten us really close to that mule deer buck. And so he kind of laughed with this scenario too, because he was like, man, like, you had it again. Like, your instinct was right where the bear was going, how it was going to come back to the carcass, the position you had to take when you were going to move in on it. Like, all of that was right. You just had to trust yourself. And obviously the details matter. Like I was trusting myself, but then, just for whatever reason, thought last light was actually 15 minutes sooner. So that kind of became a running joke for us for a while, that I just needed to stay still, for 30 more seconds. And even coming back, there was people at church that, I'd run into, and they're like, oh, I heard you're just a little impatient. Like, could have had a bear, but you couldn't sit still for another 30 seconds. And so like, I knew that story was circulating a bit. And yeah, Chad was just poking fun at me, but it was genuinely a great time. Like, loved that hunt. Super fun time with both Colin and Chad. And in hindsight, like, we were reflecting to, like, say that Colin's bull doesn't get stolen, or whatever actually did happen to it. That means Chad kills the bull on the first day, Colin kills the bull on the last day. Say that I had played the situation out correctly, I kill a bear on the second day. Potentially, if, we have that experience with the super ticked bull, potentially I kill a bull as well. So like, this trip, it was still successful. Like, Chad still got a bull. We still had a great time, but it was almost like the most successful trip that I have ever had, in my life, where we almost had 3 bulls and a bear down. Plus, Colin almost had a stud buck antelope. We had that opportunity on a mule deer buck, so it was a trip that had plenty of opportunity. And like I had said on the podcast too, like, all we can get are opportunities. Like, I can't guarantee a kill for myself or for anybody, but thankfully we got one out of that trip. Almost had a couple more, but didn't quite play out that way. But all that to say, we had close calls. I had really close calls with bears. I think Colin saw a sow and 2 cubs later on in the trip. We had come across other bear tracks where I think it was that boar kind of coming in on the backside of that hill to check out Chad's carcass. But that was the only other bear opportunities that we had that trip. But so bears have still evaded me. They have, still been mysterious creatures that show enough to keep me hooked. But I've yet to punch a tag on a bear yet. So I know that's always a goal of mine each year. Kind of the longer it goes, the more it stays there, where I almost want to kill a bear more than anything else. But definitely in the fall, it's hard for me to pull away from elk hunting to just try to fall bear hunt or something like that. So it's more opportunistic for me at that point. But yeah, one of these days I'll have a bear on the ground. I'm confident of that. But I've had lots of fun hunting them and learning about them. Seen a lot of bears now, and just love every experience and every encounter with black bears. So one of these days we'll have it. It's also great meat. I think that's something too. So the first bull that I ever killed the day before, one of the guys that I was hunting with did kill a black bear with his bow. So we exchanged some meat. And really, black bear is probably our family's second favorite meat. So we like elk the best, but then black bear is probably our second favorite above deer, above beef, like all of it. We really like bear meat. Makes probably the best burger I've ever had. So always hopeful to, get some more bear meat in the freezer too. So if you haven't had it, I'd recommend you eat it. You definitely have to pay attention to temps because you can get trichinosis from some bears. They do carry that, but if you cook it at a certain temp for a certain amount of time, then it kills all of that. And so you don't have to worry about that at that point. But it's something to look into if you've never done it before, but would highly recommend trying it. I think it's great meat. So that's the bear podcast for today. Let me know if you guys have had experiences with bears, if you've got any tips, or if you want to, throw some hate at me for my missed opportunities on bears. That's, I'm used to it, I guess. But yeah, I'd love to hear stories about bears. I really do still enjoy them. Still an awesome animal to me. And I really love hunting them. So, but that's all for this week. Like we say every time, we'd love your guys' support. If that's through you shopping and buying some of our merch. This is another hat that we have. So this is a performance snapback. I've really loved this hat as well. We have these gray ones and then we have white ones as well. And then, we have an assortment of hats that have been selling recently. So it's been great. But merch is a tangible way to support us. Again, that money just goes back into the nonprofit and continues to kind of like build the brand, but build the organization. And then as always, you have an opportunity to donate as well. Tax deductible donations to us as a registered nonprofit. And so that's another way to support. You can do one-time donations, monthly donations. You can set up like any type of donation plan that you want, but we're extremely grateful for the support that you guys have shown us and the community that is continuously building around Holy Mountain. So I feel like we've got some good momentum and I'm excited about, just where we're headed in this next year to 2 years. And just as it continues growing and building and that momentum, it's kind of like snowballing as it's rolling downhill. So just thankful for you guys and your support and your community and just looking to continue growing it. So really appreciate that. That's all for this week though. We'll catch you guys next week. As always, hope that you're out there living the values and living the motto and just positively impacting your community. So I'd encourage you guys to go do that this week and we'll see you next time.